Welcome to McCloud, California, ground zero for the latest skirmish between big water and rural America. A 4-year battle over water rights that has turned ugly.
It's gold. We're giving away our gold, and I think that's wrong.
Alice DeBond's family settled McCloud at the turn of the century, and the gold she's referring to is this: pristine, glacier-fed spring water from Mount Shasta, liquid gold in today's market. Nestle, the biggest player in bottled water, made a deal with McCloud to tap their water and mine that gold. But residents like DeBond are fighting it.
And if Nestle's would give us a decent contract, everything would be great. But they took advantage of a town who's desperate, and we need jobs, we really do.
McCloud, a former mill town, fell on hard times in 2003 when the lumber company shut its doors. While short on jobs, there's no question that McCloudites have plenty water. The tiny town sits at the source that feeds 77% of all Californians. This is the holding tank in McCloud for the excess water that runs off Mount Shasta. Water so pure, it requires no treatment. It runs straight into the tap. 4 years ago, Nestle signed a deal to pump 522 million gallons of it a year. Now, how much is it willing to pay McCloud for that privilege? Roughly $300,000 annually.
What the town is actually getting for the water is 1/10 cent a gallon.
Alice and her daughter Deborah have been fighting against the Nestle deal the district signed. They say it's a lopsided deal, heavily tilted in the multinational company's favor.
The contract is really a win-win for Nestle, and I don't see it a win-win for McCloud.
But just next door, talk about locking Nestle out is raising tempers.
How many of you all support Nestle coming into your town and setting up a bottling plant?
We all do.
All of us? Unanimously?
Unanimously. Absolutely.
Business breeds business, as you well know.
Martha and Ron Berriman are lifelong residents of McCloud.
This has become a community that is, you could call it dying. It's becoming a retirement community. We have a high school with a total enrollment of 6 students.
When you go just retirement, you've lost your fire department, you've lost your ambulance crew.
Not only does McCloud lack the manpower for an ambulance or emergency medical care, but the fire department is $48,000 in the red. In a town of retirees, many consider this opportunity the difference between life and death.
To my way of thinking, there's no reason for this. If you get a good business, put it in here, it's not hurting anybody, and it's going to make it possible for the younger couples to come back.
These residents are convinced that Nestle's initial promise of 60 jobs will grow exponentially, and it may be the town's last shot at survival. Ron Berriman says he's fighting for his friends.
They're hanging on by their fingernails.
And they're suffering.
Sure, they're suffering. A friend of mine was a sawyer in a sawmill. That's a very high-paying, very high-skilled job. He's now working as a security guard out in the woods, kind of a patrolman in the woods. He cuts lawns in the evenings. He's a good friend of mine. He's a hell of a hard worker, and my heart just goes out to those people.
Alice says her heart wants what's best for McCloud, but says long-term, this 100-year deal with Nestle just won't wash.
100 years is too long?
Well, yeah, hey, 100 years, you know what water might be worth? Look what it's been worth in just my lifetime. I can remember when you never bought water. Nobody bought water in a bottle.
Bottled water is a license to print money.
I don't know.
Alan Snitow, co-author of a new book about the privatization of water, says that taking water, which is basically free, and turning it into a commodity is big business. A business, he says, based on a fallacy. While much of the public believes that bottled water is more closely monitored than tap, Snitow says the reverse is actually true. Tap water undergoes more rigorous testing and federal scrutiny.
You almost feel as if, are we really being suckered? Are we that foolish? Do we have that much extra money to spend that we're willing to spend 1,000 times more for a piece of plastic that has some water in it than something that comes out of the tap?
Apparently, we do. Fact is, consumers are thirstier than ever for bottled water. On average, Americans guzzle 28 gallons a year and pay 4 times more per gallon for bottled water than for gasoline. Business around the world is booming to the tune of $100 billion a year. Swiss-based Nestle draws 10% of its $79 billion in global profits from bottled water, making it the industry's giant. Unlike other brands that originate from the tap, Nestle pumps spring water and is steadily buying water from local streams, lakes, and rivers.
If you have a multinational corporation coming in and competing with people in a local watershed, you have this enormous power imbalance.
With 23 bottling facilities from coast to coast, clashing with local citizens has become part of the price of doing business. 5 years ago in Wisconsin, local fishermen helped beat back Nestle's bottling plants. Since then, Nestle has fine-tuned their marketing machine.
Hey, Penny.
Hi, Dave.
How are you?
Meet the kinder, gentler face of big water in rural America, Nestle Regional Manager Dave Palais.
Actually, quite a few things that I haven't seen here before.
Well, most of the time you can.
You're diversifying.
Part Mr. Rogers, part lobbyist, Palais is viewed by many as the white knight who will save their town.
Getting things straightened up.
It's that time of year.
After 4 years on the ground in McCloud, there's hardly a merchant on Main Street who doesn't call him friend.
I'm going fishing. You can go Harley riding.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a deal. I think my mother would prefer if I went fishing.
Whether it's donating $1,000 to the local cemetery cleanup,
You brought your work clothes.
Yeah, I know.
or taking time to convert McCloud one resident at a time.
When are we going to go on that motorcycle ride?
Whenever you want.
It's clear, judging by the warmth and affection that greets him, that Palais has already delivered McCloud something they desperately need: hope.
The place is looking great.
So your best case scenario, David, looking at this town, how is it going to look and feel different once Nestle has set roots here?
The schools will be revitalized. The businesses will see more customers coming in. There'll be just more life in the community.
Palais insists that the new million-square-foot plant that Nestle plans to build on the old mill site will be environmentally friendly.
Not that much water in the creek for this.
But residents like Richard McFarland don't believe it. They're concerned about Nestle's giant footprint.
We could put every single house in town inside that building. It's a 23-acre facility.
McFarland says the sheer scale of the plant and the proposed 600 truck trips a day threaten the idyllic, unspoiled land where he has raised 3 sons. What concerns McFarland the most? While Nestle is limited to 522 million gallons a year of spring water, there is a debate about how much of the town's ground or well water Nestle is entitled to. Water that is essential to everyday life.
The contract allows for unlimited pumping of groundwater.
But Nestle will tell you that they have no intention of pumping the groundwater.
Well, of course they will, but they have not been willing to amend the contract or to put that in writing.
We do not have an unlimited ability to pull groundwater out, and I know some people interpret the contract that way, but we don't have any rights to pump unlimited groundwater.
While both sides argue over the fine print in the Nestle deal, they agree there's a bigger battle brewing over something that's not even mentioned in the contract. Remember the old mill site that Nestle purchased? It comes with the right to pump 2.8 billion gallons of water a year directly from the McCloud River. That has some residents outraged about what they consider a profound threat to tourism and endangered species.
When the mill was operating, they have a pipeline from the McCloud River that's about 7 miles away. That's not spring water. We're not going to bottle that water.
Given the fact that some people are concerned about that, why not go ahead and make the promise to them that you're not going to touch it?
There are different people with different interests, and we want to try to be able to talk with all of them and figure out a happy medium that will meet our needs and meet their needs as well.
What residents say they need is a guarantee Nestle won't pump the McCloud River for industrial use.
At the very upper part of the watershed, we have the McCloud redband trout. The McCloud redband is one of the rarest trout in the world, but it doesn't have much habitat.
To get a sense of what's at stake if Nestle starts diverting millions of gallons of water, just spend a little time with Brian Stranko, Executive Director of California Trout. Cal Trout is closely monitoring the McCloud deal.
At one time, the salmon and steelhead that lived here were so plentiful that you could walk across the river on their backs. And the Native Americans that lived here would spearfish for them and use that as much of their livelihood.
So what's the worst case scenario?
This would vanish. This would go away.
Completely go away? Like, you know, the rush that I'm seeing right now could go down to a trickle?
Could perhaps be a trickle, and then everything else that feeds off the water system would go away with it.
Pro-Nestle residents like Ron Berriman fear that Nestle will finally get fed up and abandon the project.
The thing that I find offensive to me is the same kind of environmental regulation that decimated the timber industry is now being used against the town that's on its knees to decimate the possibility of the water bottling industry to come in to replace it. So, we're getting a double whammy.
Berriman warns that other towns have lost lucrative bottling deals and tempers are rising.
I always refer to myself as living in the People's Republic of California.
How divisive would you say this issue is?
Well, a lot of people won't shop in town anymore.
What?
Yeah.
People won't shop in town?
No, they won't shop in town because I own a market.
They won't come to your store?
No, some won't.
Because
some
you've
won't.
been vocal in...
Because I don't think the contract is fair.
Alice DeBond says despite Nestle's sales pitch, she's not buying anything unless the company puts it in writing.
I would probably profit more than anybody in town if Nestle's went in. But when I look at it long term, I'm thinking about the long term. I'm thinking about my kids, my grandkids. Giving our gold away, and water is gold. And we're going to give our gold away?
For Ron Berriman, every day that passes is like watching that gold go down the drain.
They're using it for boating, recreation, you name it. Everybody's making money on the water but poor old McCloud, and we're right there at the source.
You might as well get something for something that you're not getting now.
Exactly.
After losing a bid in court to block construction of the Nestle plant, a group of McCloud residents has vowed to fight on, and the state of California has ordered a more thorough environmental review before a shovel hits the ground.